International. And on behalf of our pastors, the Reverend Dr. Chanel D. Felder, Reverend Dr. Alexis L. Felder, we thank you for joining us this morning for this topic, Disinvestment to Reinvestment. And our discussion this morning is looking at, for the last 3 years in my doctoral program, I have been studying the effects of disinvestment in the African American community. Once a community becomes about 35% African American, we start experiencing the disinvestment by major retailers moving out of our communities, as well as different manufacturing companies that leave our community. And it has been a huge impact in terms of how it's devastated our community, in terms of if you look at middle-class communities where we have average incomes of $75,000 and above, if you look at the educational aspects, you see where even with those things that are really what most investors look at, we still experience disinvestment. And once you start experiencing that disinvestment, it's a financial cost to us, because if we don't have retailers and manufacturers in our community, we then have to supplement and pay the taxes out of our own revenues. And so we want to look at then, Mayor James Ford is with us. I don't know if Mayor Karen was able to get on. I see a phone number there. I know she was going to dial in because we're actually at a conference at this particular time. So if she's able to get on, we'll be able to include her. But these are communities that have been impacted by the loss of major retailers, and trying to understand some of the things that they're doing and the experience that they've had in being able to rebuild their communities. So the speakers that are on the line, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and give a little bit about their background so we can have a little discussion around this subject. And so, Pastor Michael, you want to start first?
Good morning, everyone. I am Reverend Michael Russell, a Chicago resident all of my life. I am also a pastor in the Evangelical Lutheran Church, as well as a founder of a congregation in the South Side of Chicago, actually in South Suburbs, Country Club Hills, called Jubilee Faith Community. I am currently working with Crossroads Anti-Racism Organizing and Training as a national organizer and consultant and workshop facilitator. We do workshops based upon or focusing on systemic systemic and institutional racism and how it supports the particular kind of constructs that we are talking about today. As a long-term Chicago resident, I have been exposed to many neighborhoods being disenfranchised. I've been exposed to many neighborhoods that are in transition. In fact, for a time, part of what is in my resume is the executive director of Neighborhood Housing Services West Inglewood's division. And so I see some head nods, so you know that we are working specifically to kind of disrupt that cycle of attrition, that cycle of disinvestment, and actually to move banks through the Community Reinvestment Act to reinvest. And we can talk about all the problems with that. but so that is sort of the pedigree. That's Reverend Craig has been a long-term friend. Our lives intersected in our youth in the very neighborhoods we also grew in West Inglewood and in Chicago, Illinois. And then we met again in the South Suburbs, in the suburb of Madison, where I am now residing, and I have raised my family, at least a good portion of my family there, and live with my partner, my queen, Deborah Russell. And just really glad to be part of this panel and this conversation.
Thank you so much. Mayor James Ford.
Yes, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
How's everyone doing this morning? Good. Yeah, I'm a longtime resident of city of Chicago, from the South Side, from the Woodlawn area. Kind of grew up there as a young man, and later on moving into the suburbs, to the city of Country Club Hills. Been here about 40 years, I guess. Uh, and based on my experience, I've seen a lot of disinvestment here in the Southland. But first of all, I retired from IBM, served 30 plus years, and retired as a project manager, moving to the city of Country Club Hills, getting involved in the many committees. Became an alderman here, served as an alderman in the city of Country Club Hills for 9 years in the fourth ward. And then in 2014, 2015, ran for the office of mayor. And I've held that office ever since then. And so my wife and I, Jacqueline Ford, we are members of New Faith Baptist Church International. We know the Craigs, and we appreciate this opportunity to be on this panel today.
Thank you so much. Is Mayor Sheila Chalmers Curran on? Okay, I don't hear any response. Pastor Reggie Williams.
Good morning, beloved. I am Reginald Williams Jr., pastor First Baptist Church of University Park. So good to see so many familiar faces on here. Mike, I ain't seen you in a minute, man.
It's good to see you, Reggie.
My buddy Larry at the gym. I don't know what I'm supposed to be saying. I got on late. I apologize. I just got off of another Zoom call. I'm so sick of Zoom. But I'm happy to be here for a discussion about economic empowerment for our people. And I'm looking to learn, and whatever I can offer in the way of assistance or whatever, I'm happy to do so. I am going to have to hop off because I got my babies this weekend, so I got some running around to do with my daughters. But I'm certainly happy to contribute in any way I can. God bless you all.
Well, thank you so much. And so, Pastor Russell, I'd like to start with you because you talked about your work with Crossroads and the training that you do. And so I took Pastor Russell's class when I was the interim director at the Community Renewal Society. I actually had to go through it twice. And so, not because I'm remedial, but one, because we did it as a leadership team, and then we did it with our entire board, as well as our entire staff. And one of the things I distinctly remember when we went through that particular process and going through that class, we talked about the fact that, you know, as African Americans, we are always striving to be upward bound, to get to the next level. And one of the things that you showed us, we had to do this right on this board, and we looked at what is our American dream? And we put in all those things. We put in the education, we put in job success, we put in the house with the white picket fence. But what we found is that no matter what we achieved, once we got in that circle, we were never accepted in the dominant society. So we were always going to experience oppression, marginalization, or disenfranchisement. And so can you just share with the audience how those things impact us as we live in this suburban community and face this disenfranchisement?
Thank you. It's okay if I call you Robbie, because that's what I'm saying.
Please.
Okay, all right. And Michael,
we teenage friends,
right?
We've been around since teenagers, so all we know is Mike and Robbie. That's why I always hesitate when I call your name. I'm like, what do I call?
No, Mike, whatever works there. And I do want to make this quick because I do want to get Reggie's input before he has to go take care of little ones. That's the coolest thing about Zoom, and the most difficult thing about Zoom is that your office is also where your family lives. All right, but I'm gonna do a quick stair step, kind of an economic escalator, if we might call that. The country was created for and by white people, and as a part of that very creation, people of color groups were disenfranchised from the very beginning. The first legislation, the first immigration legislation, talks about free white persons of good moral character. That is called the Nationalization Act of 1790. Yes. And this is right after our constitutional conventions, and we have become a constituted country in 1787, whereas certain groups are disenfranchised. Indigenous people are not part of our constitution. They are their own sovereign nation. And as a part of their sovereignty, the United States begins an immediate attack upon that sovereignty to move them off that land. So this is a disenfranchised people of color group. Then slaves in the diaspora, Africans who were literally brought to this country in order to be the economic engine of this country, who are brought here as commodities. And what I mean by commodities is in that very constitution, they're reduced to 3/5 of a human in order to satisfy the statistics for population. Mayor Ford, you know what this is about. This is about representation, right? And so what we're reduced to 3/5 of a human being. So we cannot own land. Indigenous people who can sit on land do not really own the land, and they're removed from the land forcibly. Then as we move up into that ladder, we are not entitled to, because we're not entitled to owning land, we do not have any kind of tax advantages or incentives that go along with us. And since we are a commodity ourselves as enslaved Africans, we are not entitled to ownership. Even though there's a whole lot of discussion about how we are owned, we do not become entitled to ownership. We do not become entitled to citizenship until we are freed persons. And after becoming freed persons, there becomes an immediate attack on our freedom through all kinds of legislation and military policing in the Jim Crow system and the Jim Crow laws. Once we have achieved freedom in the 13th, 14th, and the 15th Amendments, we have achieved the right to vote, and then those are immediately attacked. And they affect our ability to gain and support and sustain our economic empowerment. There are towns that are destroyed. I'm sure you've heard. I'm sure you've even watched the destruction of Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Black Wall Street of its day. All of that continues to create a legacy of disenfranchisement that continues even today. Where and how? Well, let us not spend a lot of time talking about the way that the disrepresentation and the disproportional impact of COVID has affected our communities economically. There's no way to measure it yet. But all of those follow this historical way of the United States legislating itself to become a country that is built upon the framework and sustaining the ideology of white supremacy, so that whiteness is the thing that is always to be paid and paid for. I'll stop there. We can get into some specific, and I'd love to do that. You know that, Robbie. But I really don't want to lose some of these wonderful wizened voices, particularly Reggie and Mayor Ford. So let me back up and make some space.
Okay. And so I see where Dr. Carruthers has joined us, and I think I saw where President Sheila Chalmers Curran has joined us. So we'll get, yep, I see her on the screen now. So they'll be able to add their voices to this conversation. But Pastor Reggie, you said that you may have to drop off. And I know that you have been fighting there in University Park in terms of for economic disenfranchisement and different issues that have been raised in your community. And so I'd just like to get your voice or insight on how this is impacting not only your community, but us as a people. We can't hear you, you're still on mute.
Yeah, I will kind of chime in by just saying ditto to everything Mike said. On a broad scale, particularly in University Park, where we are over 800 days now without good water, where we are in a food desert, where you can have a golf course and no grocery store, where we are at this point 90%, over 90% African American, and poverty level is above the national average. All of those things are economic indicators and have economic effects with regard to the disenfranchisement that Michael spoke of. And so part of the analysis that kind of, I don't know if it's analysis or conspiracy theory, but paying attention to what goes on around the country, there's a similar playbook of um, devaluing an area so people can get land pennies on the dollar, and then reestablishing it and kicking everybody else out, bringing other folks in, what have you. I'm not sure if this airport is going to come out there or not, but there have been a lot of infrastructural things going on which do not have our people working on those sites, right? And so with those infrastructural, whenever you see infrastructure changes, you know something else is changing. They just put what, 4 or 5 years ago, I think, Larry, 2015, I think it was, when they put the exchange in on University Parkway, right? As opposed to having to go to Salt Trail all the way to Monique. Now they got a University Parkway to come straight in. And so there's some economic things going on beneath the surface that folks are not, but there's a plan already in place. And so by the time all that stuff happens, the plan is already in place for not only disenfranchisement, but also for takeover, right? I know at the church, we've been offered, we sit on 15 acres of land paid for. There have been a number of offers over the years, and I've told them to kick rocks. No, you're not doing that, right? And so part, I say all of that to say, to give you context about where I am and where I'm privileged to serve. But the importance of not only preserving, fighting, and trying to grow and develop the kind of economic frameworks in our communities, as Mike has said, has always been a fight, and it continues to be a fight to this day. If we were in Highland Park and not University Park, this water would have been fixed a long time ago. It has everything to do with economics and race, right? And so that's kind of the framework we're in, and that we have been fighting, continue to fight. With specific, and I know I'm being specific about the water issue. But there is a case before state's attorney where we're seeing where that progresses right now. But it's having a lot of effects economically in terms of the ability to grow. Now, that's not even considering. I don't know who was on this line, so let me say this very. That's not considering some of the challenges that are there and have been there with village government, which is a whole nother ball of wax. But particularly as we talk about economic development, Amazon, it's another piece in terms of economic development. University Park has a what's it called? Industrial park. Companies come, get these major TIFs, and then leave, right? And we keep inviting folks to come without getting much from it, right? That would help develop and provide jobs. And then when those construction jobs come through or whatever, if you go out there now, they're constructing, I think, a Carvana on University Parkway and Cicero. A Carvana supply place is what I was told. And we still don't have a damn grocery store. All right. So the decisions that are being made, who's benefiting from those decisions on a smaller scale, which is servicing on a larger scale, what Mike was talking about, that has gone on and been a playbook from the inception of this country. Is some of the economic impacts that we have to struggle, fight against. Hope that answers your question, Reverend Rob.
Okay. And so, Mayor Ford, I know in Country Club Hills, you guys have are starting to see some investment in your community, and so I know you guys have struggled to get to where you are now. And so, how do you get from disinvestment to reinvestment in your community?
The disinvestment in our town and in the south suburbs is very real. And I just want to bring it home to Chicago. Growing up in Chicago, I used to hear my parents say, well, they're going to move us out to the suburbs so that they can move the other people back downtown. And just this week, I've been downtown Chicago at a conference, and I'm witnessing this. and it's true. Okay, when you go downtown, it's developed. In the areas that I used to live in, it's been redeveloped, and other people are moving in. So it's really a tragedy that this is happening, and there's no, you know, development that takes place in our community without a struggle. In Country Club Hills, for instance, we do have some development, but we have to fight every day to get Afro Americans employed in these businesses that they are trying, these companies like Amazon and other companies um, that are moving into our communities. We have to fight to make sure that we have the proper number of Afro Americans or people of color working at these sites. And so it's been very hard and a struggle for all of us. And just working with Cook County, they have not made it any easier because there's a thing called Class 6 and a Class 8. Um, Cook County voted to make it very difficult for a business in our community in the Southland to get a Class 8. The stipulations that they put on it was totally unjustified. And so it's been very difficult in just maneuvering through this process. But I think what happened here in Country Club Hills when the population changed, people began to migrate to other places. It left us with about 85 to 90% Afro American people of color here. And so it's very difficult to get other businesses and development to come into our communities without some kind of incentive. So we've had to incent our businesses to come, and you have to be very careful because when you give them a TIF or Class 8, when that runs out, they want to leave town and leave vacant land and vacant buildings in our community. So we are working very hard to see if we can bring Afro American businesses in our town, businesses that would be willing to stay and offer jobs and employment to our people that live here. We are very qualified people. We can do the same as other people, but for some reason, the Caucasian people, when you become 85% Afro Americans, they want to leave town, and the money seems to go with them. And so we have been fighting pretty hard to see if we could collaborate with the other mayors in the Southland to make this issue go away and that we can be self-sustaining. And I know Mayor Sheila has a lot to say about that. So, but that's kind of where we are. We are fighting every day to survive and to make our communities what it should be and to make our people, give our people employment and a great place to live.
So Mayor Sheila Chalmers Curran, I'll turn it over to you since Mayor Ford already gave you introduction.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry for being late. As you know, I had some challenges with getting in, and I was on the phone, but I was muted, so you couldn't hear me. So I had to work with doing it this way. But I grew up on the south side of Chicago.
Mayor Chalmers, we can only see from your mouth down.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay, now we can see you now.
I'll lean back. Okay. Sorry. I grew up on the south side of Chicago in the 34th Ward, and spent a number of years growing up and going to high school there. And so I understand some of the changes. Changes were happening there in the 60s when my parents moved into the 34th Ward right there, on 100, which is called Washington Heights. So changes continue to happen that way when we move into certain areas. I moved to the village of Matheson in 1983, when the village itself was about 40% African American. And so I've seen what it was like then, and I see what it's like now. We can talk about some of the research that has been done in reference to redlining throughout the Southland, and it's been well documented that those areas have been redlined in our communities. But I also know that one of the mentionings of some of the different incentives that we give in order for us to be able to attract businesses. If in fact we did not have a Class 8 for certain communities, we would not be able to attract businesses. I know that for the Amazon alone, there have been some negative statements in reference to the Amazon. In the village of Matheson, there is no TIF for the Amazon in our community. That's been misinformation, but I want people to know that it is very difficult as an African-American mayor to attract businesses to our communities unless we do have incentives. Yes. The village itself has continued to try to make sure we have a list of African-American contractors and different individuals to make sure they work and are part of those projects. But it is difficult. You know, what I've been doing, and I know Mayor Ford has also, is working together with other members here in the Southland in order for us to move the Southland forward. I know it's extremely difficult, and the reason why people tend to look at it a little bit differently if you are part of the change. I go out and actively recruit for individuals to come to the village itself. As Trustee Craig knows, that I was baptized in what could go wrong in retail when I first came in, with stores closing all around us. And what we have to do, not only as a community, but as a people, we have to step up and do more. It's really easy to talk about how bad these things are, but what are we doing to change it? Are we a part of the government changes? Are we a part of, if in fact we feel that certain individuals are not doing the job that they should do, are we helping and working to make that better? Anyone that knows me for 15 minutes know that I am continually, actively pursuing to make sure that individuals come to the village of Matheson. So I want to be specific and make sure I answer some of the questions that you might want to have answered, so I don't just tell everything. I just want to say that it is difficult, and we have to do everything we can to make sure we move the Southland forward. And by being engaged and being a part of this dialogue, and including being involved with our government officials to make sure that we hold their feet to the fire.
Thank you so much. And I see Dr. Carruthers is on the phone, and I know that you're working on reparations, and I don't know if reparations can help in this situation, or how do we as a community be able to recoup some of the losses that we have sustained as a community just by resources that have been withheld from us, or how we get ahead in fighting against this oppression that we've had for so many years. And I see that you're in a vehicle, so I know you're moving, so I don't know how much time you have, but if you can share with us some insight.
Thank you so much for having me, Reverend Robbie. I truly appreciate this opportunity. Let me just share that I am speaking from the lens of one who lived in the South suburban community before 1970. In fact, it was 1964. I was one of 3 families that lived in Park Forest. And as a trained sociologist, Park Forest was one of those communities that nationally you understood that you had to study around this whole question of integration. And as that related to what was then the mantra of opening up the suburbs was supposed to be a response to the, quote, 1968 civil disobedience. And the plan that was suggested, which was nationally actually instituted and explored as an experiment, was that each of the suburbs were to take 10% of their population from people of color in order to integrate them and to essentially disaggregate their political power as a way to evidence, quote, integration and as a model for justice. And Park Forest was the planned community that was to be a model for that. But what the research also showed very clearly that there was a cultural, mental, psychosocial statistic that represented 25% of tipping, meaning that once a community became 25% people of color, then called minorities, us, white people would flee. And so you had to maintain something less than 20% before white people created this Afrophobia, or a fear that they were being overcome. That was actually in the sociological literature as a way to create planned communities. And so I lived in the South suburban area and have a familiarity with it from as far back as 1964. The only other communities of color in the suburbs were those which emerged out of either Black towns or an effort of Black people to intentionally create a Black town. So having said that then, and fast forward to really your fundamental question about the role of the church, which I find so compelling and so needed, I am privileged now to serve as General Secretary of the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference, and my lens there is national. And in trying to address this question that you're talking about in terms of the role of the church for disinvestment and reinvestment, there are a couple of observations I can make and I think contribute to the conversation. One is that we need to take much more seriously, I think, the call of our ancestors, the Sankofa moment, to go back to what it means to have as a part of our North Star a vision for self-determination and independent self-economic development control, using the power of our political and economic power to transform the reality that we have. In many ways, I think we have become so reliant on the public process and the political process that we have abandoned the real strengths that we have, which have been born in the church as a hub of our economic and our ecosystem of survival. So having said that, the work we are doing nationally, for example, includes convening, supporting, finding capital to support the ministries of clergy who see this vision that we have to move out of a theology of scarcity, where there's this mythology that to do ministry, you have to be poor, that you have to be disengaged from money, etc., or a ministry of prosperity, which is defined in some ways as it's okay for me to pimp the people and go get an airplane when the people can't even feed themselves, and they are supporting me getting an airplane to fly around the country. And so we have elevated, and we are getting great traction around the theology of sufficiency, meaning that God has given all of us enough. We have to be better stewards, and we have to redistribute the way in which wealth and wellness occurs in our communities. And the moral agency, the voice of the church, is important in making that happen. So there needs to be a theological shift that undergirds the way in which we prophetically preach the word and the way in which we define our ministries in community to measure how we in fact live out in word and deed what God is calling us to do. We are working on a model called the just church. The just church meaning that we ought to be able to walk out of our sanctuary. We enter to worship, we leave the sanctuary, and we ought to see just communities. And just communities are communities where we see our people well and healthy, largely because the church has taken an active role in demanding that justice does matter and engaging all of the various institutions which would preclude us from having well, healthy lives. And that takes us to this point of reparations. The notion of reparatory justice is a notion of healing. It is a notion of spiritual healing and of economic wealth redistribution and of psychological well-being based on the fact of international protocols and law, as well as biblical principles of restitution and sin, that you have to admit and own up to your complicity in these unjust systems. And because you do that, you enter into a process in which you make right your wrongs, in which you become repairers of the breach, in which you have the moment of Zacchaeus, of conversion, and you vow not to repeat the privilege of the beneficial gains you have gotten of enrichment based on the exploitation of people. That is what the demand for reparations is. That is what is occurring not only in part in the United States, right up the road north in Evanston, but also in the rest of the world. And I think the takeaway there is that one of our weaknesses is that we work in silos. And there is a lot of lost opportunity because we don't collaborate strategically from the local level to the state level to the national level in ways that we could leverage our moral agency and political and economic power to make the difference in our own lives. But it all begins, I'm suggesting, with us understanding the theological call that we become the prophetic voices for the demand for justice, but also attendant to that is the hard work that must be done through our ministries and through our leadership. First, modeling the model, willing to abandon this notion of God, faith, and money having to be either a model of scarcity or a model of prosperity against the common good of the people. And so the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference is engaged in working with clergy all around the country and in clusters where we are attempting to support, facilitate the innovation of how our churches can reclaim their historic role as epicenters, as a hub for economic development and well-being of our people. And I'm just privileged to be able to participate in that. And I think that there is much work to be done, that we thank you for your leadership in even calling this conversation. The whole phrase of disinvestment and investment is in and of itself an important one that we've got to have our clergy leaders understand. And so again, I thank you for asking me to contribute to this conversation, and I thank you for your leadership.
Thank you so much. So as we look at this, I know being a minister and a trustee, I see from both ends, knowing that from historically, the biggest organization in the Black community is the church. That's who we have relied on for years. And looking at it from a perspective as an elected official, it takes both in order for us to move forward in communities. But I'm also looking at the fact that there's so many opportunities for us. And so I'm looking at the fact that some of the things that we don't do is hold corporate companies responsible for their acts. We look for years, and the church have done marches, they've done letter writing. We've tried, even as the community of Matheson, to write to different companies saying that we want you to participate in our communities. And so at what point do we start holding all of these different communities, these different organizations responsible? And so I've been researching the idea of shareholder responsibility and how it could impact our communities. And one of the things that I looked at, and it's really from, I guess, the church's lens that this came about. And my professor asked me one day, had I heard about these little nuns that were in another town who felt that they weren't, that General Electric was not being responsible in terms of how they conducted business in their community, and they wanted to hold them responsible. So they submitted a shareholder resolution for them to change how they impacted their community, and that they be more environmentally concern and how they impacted their community. And they actually, once they put through this shareholder resolution, at first it was just like it was thrown out immediately. But then after they reviewed it again, because they came back to them, they actually changed how they interacted with their community. I also looked at the fact that one of the ones that really struck me was with Cracker Barrel. Cracker Barrel left our community overnight. We woke up one morning and they were gone. I had just eaten that Friday night, Sunday morning, somebody told me it's gone. I'm like, how can that be? And with Cracker Barrel, they have filed 270 resolutions against that company and how they operate, how they engage people to change how they operate. And so one of the things that it's hard for us to compete sometimes, because when you talk about organizing, there's organized money and there's organized people. In most cases, we don't have the organized money, we can have organized people. But if you look at it from becoming active and putting through shareholder proposals, then we can compete with organized money. And the way that we do that is that when you look at how this new way of organizing and fighting against injustice is coming about, that we don't recognize, the most money that is in the stock market is based on our pension funds, based on money that's in there from our unions. And that's how they have been able to force these companies to be able to look at their corporate responsibilities and how they're engaging in communities. So it's a lot of social shareholder responsibilities that have been going on in the market that we could possibly participate in. And so what they look at, you can go, I'm working now with the local municipal fund and looking at the type of shares they have in their fund. And we can identify, I've been able to identify from that which of those companies, you know, we have companies that won't come into the Black community, they'll come across the street. They'll do everything but come in. They say that they support our community. What they do is they support taking our money. Because as long as we feed into their organization and buying from them, I'm eating from their organizations, they're very content with saying that they are supporting us. But coming in our community is very different, because that's where we benefit. That's where we are able to have dollars recirculated in our community. That's when we have the opportunity of having employment in our community, not when it's across the street. And so the thing is that we have to look at, I can begin looking at other ways in which to push this, to push corporations that don't engage in our community. And so one of the companies that I looked at was Apple. Everybody loves Apple. But when you look at some of their, and they do have on file their corporate responsibility in terms of working with disadvantaged communities or marginalized communities or oppressed communities. But have you ever seen an Apple in a Black community? They said that they only put them in communities that have incomes of a certain level. And if you look at a community like ours, if you look at the South suburbs and taken into Rich Township and our surrounding suburbs, our demographics far exceed what they actually would want in terms of the community that they go in. But still it's this stigma, just because we're Black, they don't come in. And so I read an article from Mary Jo Wiggins, and she talked about the fact of once, I think you've already stated it, I think Dr. Carruthers said once it becomes more than 20%, if you look at some other documentation, it's 35%. And as Pastor Mike said, it started from the beginning. So we've always been set up to be disinvested. But what she stated, that no matter how much a Black community has succeeded, and she's looked at Atlanta, and part of her documentation is even in the city of Matheson and Country Club Hills. She looked at Mary Crescent, Country Club Hills, she looked at Matheson, she looked at Atlanta. in terms of the struggle that we have had as middle-class African-American communities of getting beyond where we are now in terms of having companies, different types of investment. And so even sometimes when we get investment, I know one of the things that we struggle with in Madison is that when it talks about a restaurant, it's a fast food restaurant rather than a sit-down restaurant. And so you can get those type of restaurants in the community, but not sit-down restaurants, or you can't get Class A retail. We have to look at lower end retail. And so when people do come, we have to look at, we have to fight really hard to get something that's people consider attractive in our communities. And as Mayor Chalmers Curran just said, then you have to incentivize. And as Mayor Ford said, are you incentivizing above what the norm, we're incentivizing above what the normal rate is, and then can we sustain it, that once they incentive run out that they don't lose. And what she says in her article is that generally when the incentives, as been stated already, they leave. And she also stated that race is still a continuing factor in terms of how they look at economic development within our communities, and that as of this point in 2021, our African-American community has not been able to overcome that, no matter what they've done, how they've invested. It usually, and I look at Madison that is at the cusp of maybe overcoming that we may be the first one. Hopefully we are, and that would impact the entire South suburbs. But at this point, it's such a fight, because if you can look at communities that have overcome, they talk about the Atlanta and all the wealthy African-American suburbs. They're no longer predominantly Black. It's only once they've integrated. So it almost suggests that unless you reintegrate, then you can't get that opportunity. I look at Hyde Park. I worked in Hyde Park. It was about to die until University of Chicago stepped in, bought up everything, and put money in, and they changed the landscape of that. And even as we look at our communities, I think Pastor Reggie Williams said they're looking at, offering to buy up his property. Something's coming, but they're gonna buy you out and not include you in that whole process, that we have to be careful. We get calls every day. Are you willing to sell your house? And so the question comes, then what are you trying to do? What's underneath that you want to buy my house that's coming, that you want other people in this community instead of me? And so there's so many questions that has to be answered. And this is just maybe another opportunity in which we can look at the whole company's responsible to look to see, why aren't you in our community? And based on the dollars that we are putting in your company in terms of stock, that we can get them to shift and come to our communities, because now we're talking the same language they are. Money speaks to money, rather than just asking you to do it because it's the right thing to do. And so I don't know, any questions, any thoughts on that at all? And that's for the audience too. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, and Mildred let me know, and she'll put those out there. Any thoughts from my panel?
I think you made a lot of great points. And so therefore, I think we can all look at that and try to do a lot better job. There is much work to be done. And so we have to continue the fight. One of the things that you did say, and I think we should take some time to look at that, is that the idea of retail changing and not being the same. Retail will never go back to where it was before. And I'm hoping that we as a people, and we look at what changes we have to make in reference to the decisions we make. As you can see, most of our young individuals and people that are a lot younger than me go on to the internet and purchase their items. So when we talk about what changes we have to make, and that's what we did in the village of Madison, is realizing that retail will never go back to where it was before. And being the village of Matheson, we were the canary in the coal mine. And so things that happened in other communities later on happened to us first, with the Target leaving, with Sam's leaving, and having to bring them back as an e-commerce. We have to, and it was told to me early on when they asked me, how are you going to change what's happening in the village of Matheson? And so you have to reach back and look at how we can change and do things different than what we've done in the past. We can continue to look at others to lift us up, but we have to lift ourselves out of this. And I think what you brought up and you mentioned in reference to the church and its involvement in what we do as a partnership and government and the church, we can begin to move us forward. And I look forward to, having and engaging in those type of conversations to continue the work that we're doing now. I know Mayor Ford and I realize how difficult this task is, but if we can all work together as we started to do, I believe we can see a lot accomplished as we move forward. So I just wanted to make that comment. I know that I came in late and I got to go to this luncheon now, but I wanted to say that what you're doing here, and I appreciate you bringing all of us together to have this discussion. So thank you.
And thank you so much. It's the municipal, conference this weekend. So we're all at the conference. I was trying to make sure my background didn't show where I was in the hotel room.
Yeah, I think mine is showing that. And I'm today being put on that executive board, so I do have to leave. But okay. I want to thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you and congratulations to your nomination to the board of the Municipal League.
Thank you.
I just wanted to thank everyone who was able to participate this morning and to bring that voice. And I also want to thank you, Robbie, for convening this and for calling us all together. I think that Dr. Carruthers and you offered up an interesting thing, and along the area or the ideology of reinvestment. What if we could and began to really reinvest in our relational leverage, in our relational power? What if we began to connect the church and our corporate interests and our civic interests, again, as had been the case when we were forced to do so? Now we choose to do so that we create the kind of leverage. I mean, what would it be if all the mayors, I heard Mayor Sheila and Mayor Ford talking about their relationship. What if we invested in all the mayors, particularly the Black mayors who are working in these areas, in being in relationship and communication with one another and feeling, I'm going to use your word, Robbie, feeling like they are shareholders in the larger corporate interests of our communities. And so they operate together. What a shareholder does have is a leverage to bring into accountability its relationship with the leadership. Because one, the shareholder has the opportunity to elect that leadership, as we do. And two, the shareholder becomes part of that leadership because they've made an investment. Suppose we understand that we have an investment in one another. And as a part of that investment, one, we share information, which I think is one of the things that you're offering here, Reverend Robbie. it does stumble. Either and way. The second that you're also offering, Dr. Carruthers, these places, these convenings where we're able to share information and also to share some direction. It is fine to fail. It'd be great if we actually shared our failures so that other people don't have to fail along the same lines, and shared how we move beyond our failures. It is fine and great to succeed, but not to succeed in the siloed relationships that we've been talking about, but to succeed in such a way that we share the collective, not just the incentives for success, but the wisdoms that how we got there and how we're able to do that. I think that for me, that exists at the cusp of any reinvestment movement that we need to do. It is about reinvesting in our relationship with one another and lowering the barriers that somehow have been constructed, I think, for us and around us that say we don't. The church has to be about corporate interests. It doesn't make sense that it's not about corporate interests and political interests, because all of that is about our interests and vice versa. And so what we have an opportunity, again, thank you for convening, is to be able to say, so let's lower let's disinvest in those barriers, and let's reinvest in the relationships that can allow us to move beyond the barriers that continue to be constructed around us. I just wanted to say that. And again, I thank you all for being here this morning.
Thank you. Thank you,
Mike, for your comments on that, because as mayors, as a mayor, and also speaking for Sheila, she's gone. but there's 17 of us African-American mayors in the Southland. And one of the biggest issues is trying to pull us together and work together. That relationship means a lot. And there's power within that relationship. Can you imagine if we could have 17 African-American mayors on the same page? You know, how that looks and representation that we would have, the voice that we'll be able to have, and we'll be able to speak, and people will begin to listen to us because uh, we have support. We have support of each other, and we have support of our constituents. Uh, you know, we have the voting power. And so if we can just mend that relationship and work together, I think we can accomplish a lot more than we have been in the past.
Amen. Pastor Reggie, do you have any other comments? I know we have passed our time, and I thank you guys for your patience. And I'm sorry again about the miscommunication in terms of getting on, but I think this has been a great conversation. And some of the notes that I see coming up, it's like how we're going to be able to continue this particular dialogue. So that's something to consider moving forward.
Yeah, I think I would echo the comments of Mama Iva, Dr. Carruthers, in the way of this whole idea around Kuji Chagalia, self-determination, and relying on ancestral wisdom and ancestral activity to guide us in terms of the ways that we develop. That does not mean we don't acknowledge and remain aware of those things that are trying to detract, dissuade, disinvest. But by the same token, it also does not diminish our ability as a people to invest in ourselves. So I appreciated Dr. Carruthers' wisdom and such, and Mike coming in behind it. But I think you know, maybe sometimes too often we rely on external forces as opposed to looking internally. So that, you know, what Mike just said about, you know, the building up of what you call it, relational. You're such a preacher. Relational. What you say? Relational.
Relational reinvestment. That's
relational
it.
Reinvestment.
Yes.
Such a preacher. But investing in the relational reinvestment may be so that the Mama Iva said we're not in these silos as we are developing. So I think that's what I would add.
Dr. Iva, do you have any closing comments?
No, I would just only add ditto that we do, and we need to begin with the asset mapping that would help us understand the great relational capital that we have and the economic capital that we have. We would be strategic, as you suggested, to target our voices of protest, and at the same time to demonstrate our internal capacity to do regardless of. There is no doubt. If we would only on Monday morning, in addition to collecting offerings, collect the amount of money brought on nails, manicures, and wigs, we could begin some serious giving circles that could be reinvestment in ourselves. And that's the kind of innovative, creative ways that I think we need to prophetically bring the call to the community, and the community would respond if we do what we're called to do as people of faith. Thank you so much.
Well, you know, and I think that my comments as we get ready to close, I've been listening to this song repeatedly I think it's for the last month. My family and my husband would probably think, is there something wrong with the computer that song keeps playing over and over and over again? But the song is I'm getting ready for overflow. And what the song says that speaks to me is that Tasha Cobb says, you're getting ready to see something that you've never seen before. And that's what I see happening in our community, that we're getting ready to see something that we've never seen before. And God is getting us ready for overflow, to make change, to do something different than what we've ever done before. And that's very powerful to me. And so as I continue to read, as I continue to see, I do see this relational investment. I do see that we can do things differently and more than what we've done before if we come together like we've never done before. I think that's the whole crux of how we move our community. When we come together, as organized people, we can move just about anything in this world when we come together. And I look to that in terms of how we impact not only the South suburbs, but as Dr. Carruthers stated, that we impact our communities nationally. And we'll be doing what God has called us to do as we speak truth to power, as we speak truth to our people. And when we're preaching in pulpits, again, it's far beyond how I feel when I go home on that day. Is what did I get to help me to push the next day to do something that I've never done before. Do we have any questions, Mildred?
Well, yes, Elder Anton, he would like to say something. Elder Anton, you can, I'll unmute you. Elder Anton.
Elder Sills, you there? I see him, I see his icon is still there. I don't know if he's still there.
Okay.
Well, he's my neighbor, so I'll know I'll get his feedback. And he and Larry pray every Monday morning, so they'll talk soon. He can give me the feedback. And so we did not open up in prayer, and that was probably because I was just so frustrated of all the stuff that was happening in the beginning. So we will close in prayer, and I'm going to leave that to Brother Larry Craig.
Amen.
Heavenly gracious Father, Lord, we thank you and praise you for another opportunity to engage. Father, you have engaged us, and so therefore we engage with each other. Lord, we pray, Father, that we'll be instruments that you can use on a daily basis as we move to a higher level of relationships that transforms people, transforms industry, transforms governments, and transforms us from the inside out. Help us, Father, to be change agents in the community. Help us to indeed see something that we've never seen before, because we become what we've never been before. Action, ambassadors, change agents, so that the communities that we live in, the communities that we engage in with people that look like us, can build and grow and be responsible people in this world, that you might be proud and pleased of. We thank you, Father, for all those who have engaged on the line. We thank you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Thank you all so much. Appreciate every single one of you. Thank you for each one of my guests. Mike, Dr. Carruthers, Mayor Ford, Mayor Chalmers Curran, and Pastor Reggie Williams. And all of you who have joined us. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you all so much. Faith Baptist Church International, Reverend Dr. Trinell and Alexis Felder, we thank you all. Thank you. This is, I think, one of many, Reverend Robbie. This was amazing. I'm so glad to be on here. So I will stop the recording at this time. Everyone have a blessed day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mildred. Bless you.